Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Lynz Piper-Loomis with I Am Silent No More. Thankful for the ability to be here on my X account at Lynz Piper-Loomis and also on X American News. So thank you. And I know we're live on Rumble as well. So thank you so much for tuning in. This is actually a special episode that I am coming on here because I found out while I was gone last week about some things that were happening in my state that needed to be addressed. So I'm going to actually just basically start with a story of a young girl, age 12, Emily Hollis, that went missing on technically she was last seen on February the 15th down in Bluffton, which is Beaufort County. Now, I will give you the good news. She has been found. She was last seen with a 16-year-old male. Um, and I'm addressing terminology today. I'm addressing some different things. And I also want to give a huge shout out to Mike Covert with Big Patriot Radio because he covered this immediately when it happened. And I wanted to come in as someone who has escaped at 16 and a half trafficking and is on the front lines in this. I want to talk about how the police department massively screwed up on this and law enforcement in South Carolina. And I'm coming to you not as underneath any professional licenses. I'm coming to you as a citizen journalist and also in my own experience in this area. So the first thing that I'm going to talk to you about, I will say Beaufort County, excuse me, Beaufort Police Department issued there's a statement they put out regarding what they call is misleading information surrounding the disappearance of Emily Hollis and the steps that were taken to recover her. I don't know if we have that available, but basically, after Mike Covert, it's a PDF that says Beaufort County or Beaufort Police Department's, or Bluffton, maybe it might be Bluffton Police Department's response to, um, the open letter. Yep, the open. So we're going to take a look at this and you can go back and read it. But basically, after Mike Covert with Big Patriot Radio came out public about this, this open letter was issued from the city of Beaufort. It's from the city council, and you guys can go and find this. It's out in the open. If you just want to scroll through this just kind of briefly, and you can pause the screen on the replay and catch this in its entirety, but they basically break down what their narrative of the events that took place, and they break down the timelines of what their protocols are and how all of this operates. So I'm not dismissing the fact that they did something, but I am going to talk about some information because, again, I understand how we're wired as, kids don't have the mindset of an adult to think through things and process through. There's a reason why legal age is 18. Granted, some people don't mature until later, but this was signed by the mayor, Mayor Pro Temp, and a few others. And then after this, there's actually their protocol, their timeline of how they, in the event something like this happens, what do they do? And before I go into my analysis of this, we're just gonna kind of scroll through this. And again, you can go back after I'm done with this live stream and you can go back and pause this and read this for yourself. It is available publicly. They did release this public statement. And I will say it is because of Michael Covert and the public putting so much pressure on them and Big Patriot Radio. So I just want to say props to him for getting this story out there. I understand thousands of people were watching it. And so I contacted some people that I know down in that area and I said, look, I want to put this out um, through my area and the platform that God has given me because I want to talk about some of these things that I believe are failures and things that we need to change because we need to clearly define some things. Some things have already been clearly defined by the Department of Justice and some other areas. But I do believe the police department dropped the ball on this. SLED dropped the ball, and I think that we need to see some resignations or some terminations of positions. And I believe if it were me and this was my child, I would be filing a lawsuit. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I can't advise that way, but based on what happened, this is sickening. Um, and I'm sick and tired of excuses. And, this is clearly a CYA, but there is a lot more that could have been done in this situation than what was actually done. So, as we're going through this, I'm just actually going to hop over here to X and make sure that I share this, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So, I'm going to be reading off of my phone, but I want to tell you something first. My own experience with a couple of situations here in South Carolina. You've heard me talk about one of these cases before, potentially. I'm not 100% sure, but when I ran for Congress, I actually went to the border. I've shared this a million times. I know you guys are probably sick and tired of hearing about it, but I really learned about how every state is a border state, and I knew that if I was going to run for Congress and they said all this stuff was happening, I needed to go see it for myself. And I almost didn't come home. It was really dangerous. It wasn't just like taking pictures. We went out in areas that a lot of politicians and people do not go to. But, anyways, when I came back, I was actually at an event where I think his name was Joe Woodward. He ran for sheriff of Beaufort County, and along with Sheriff PJ Tanner. Now, during the time that at this particular event, um, PJ Tanner and multiple other places kept saying that there wasn't a crime issue in Beaufort County. He denied, a lot of the sex and drug trafficking, these types of things. He kept assuring everyone that the city was safe and all these other things, which I knew was not true because of my relationship with some people that are federal marshals, ICE agents, um, SLED, different people in different areas, because I talked to them and I was finding out what was going on. And so Joe Woodward, and if I'm murdering his name, I'm so sorry. I would have voted for him, by the way. Anyways, he actually was talking about the crime. He was talking about what was happening in Beaufort County. So, Elizabeth, I see you're saying that we're all tired of excuses in Beaufort County. Yes, ma'am. And I know you go by Ivy. I'm sorry. But yes, yes, you're exactly right. But during this time, this was like 3 or 4 years ago. During this time, I knew he was full of crap. And it was right after that I got a call from a friend of mine who was an ICE agent in South Carolina and deputized as a federal marshal, but he had already left and was moved to another area. He was no longer deputized federal marshal, was ICE agent. He'd gotten a call about a woman who had 6 children, and the ex-husband had been deported because he was a violent criminal underneath Trump's first term, and then he came back across during Biden's term, and he basically was threatening that he was going to kill this woman and their children. And so this individual, ICE agent, had given this person his contact information and said, if anything should, if he ever gets in touch with you, let me know and we'll be right there. Well, she reached out to him and told him what was going on. And in that moment, um, he was no longer the Fed marshal. So he said, "Hey, I'm no longer in that position. I'm not actually there anymore, but I'll get a hold of the team." Well, the team was already out on another operation, so they couldn't get to her right at that moment. So the communication continued back and forth between this ICE agent and this woman, and then it stopped. It was like silence, and they didn't get to her enough time. She was able to hide the children, but she was murdered by that man, and and then he killed himself. So, but it was listed in South Carolina as a domestic homicide, but that's not what it was. It was actually a violent, illegal immigrant, that alien had come back across the border. And so it was right after that I actually cornered PJ Tanner. I said, "You're lying. I know about this, this, and this that's happening in your city." And so what ended up happening is right after that, I got a call from that ICE agent. He was in tears. He was so upset. He's like, "I don't care anymore. You can share this." Of course, I'm not going to give you his name, but anyways, he shared that, and I said that to PJ Tanner, and I said, "This has to stop." The other thing that happened was a unaccompanied minor within the last, I'll say, 4 years in South Carolina that more than likely got pregnant when she crossed the border. She was um, between the ages of 13 and 15. I can't remember the exact age, but she had at this point 8-month-old child. They were in foster care. The foster care mother. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I apologize. I thought you might have been Ivy. I see this here. I apologize. But it's great to have you on here, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Um, but anyways, and this, I was asked if I could find someone that was bilingual that could become, transfer of the foster from one foster home to the other. And that child, and she was a child, went missing, and her 8-month-old son. She had doted on this son, and all of a sudden, because I got involved, and all of a sudden she went missing. She was about 4'9". Now, she was classified as a runaway. They said that all the security cameras had been covered, which were up high, and that she just went missing. Now, they said she willingly went with the person that came to pick her up. When you are sexually groomed, when you are going through sex trafficking and anything like that, your mind is changed, you're manipulated, people break you down. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. But what ended up happening was whether she went voluntarily, it was still probably under some type of mental duress. She'd been groomed or whatever. But, anyways, they marked her as a runaway. And when you mark a child as a runaway, they don't get the same treatment as if they're marked as a missing persons. And so they're not looked for. They're the protocol and the process in finding this person is different. So I found out that there wasn't actually a missing persons report put out for both of these individuals. Eventually, there was one put out for her. It was after 48 hours, but not for the baby. And to my knowledge, um, she was never located. Now, I'm not going to talk about specific areas or anything like that, but that's just a couple of stories. And that's in Beaufort County. What's interesting is, for whatever reason, I wasn't um, afforded the opportunity when I was running for Congress to speak at Sun City GOP. But they found out about my work at the border and in human trafficking, and they invited me back in the beginning, I think, of 2023. And they said Sheriff PJ Tanner was going to be coming to speak as well. And I said, I would love to come do this. And, they apologized that they didn't get a chance to host me before for whatever reason. And I said, great. I just want to be able to speak first so that Sheriff Tanner can actually answer questions. And I put him on the spot because he's not doing his job effectively. To sit there and say that there is no trafficking in that area, he's a liar. So I'm not fond of him by any means. I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to in that regard. So now I want to shift over to the definition of and listen, I didn't get a chance to listen to Mike Covert's um his his uh his episode on this, so I don't know what he's covered and what he hasn't covered. But there was not an Amber Alert issued for this little girl. She's 12 years old, and they marked her as a runaway. So the guidelines from the Department of Justice for an Amber Alert is that there's reasonable belief by law enforcement that an abduction has occurred. And I'm going to read this to you really quick. The law enforcement agency believes that the child is in imminent danger of serious bodily injury or death. She went across state lines at 12 years of age with someone who was 4 years older than her. There's enough descriptive information about the victim and the abduction for law enforcement to issue an Amber Alert to assist in the recovery of the child. The abduction of the child aged 17 years or younger, she's 12. The child's name and other critical data elements, including the child abduction flag, have been entered into the National Crime Information Center. So those are just some of, that's just like the national. And this is just, I found this at amberalert.ojp.gov about. Okay, so then South Carolina Law Enforcement Division has their own criteria for Amber Alert. And it says, as soon as an abduction is reported and the investigation reveals all of the following: the law enforcement agency believes the child has been abducted, taken from the environment unlawfully, without authority of law, and without permission from the child's parent or legal guardian. Duh. She was removed unlawfully because she's 12, without the authority of the law. She didn't get permission from law enforcement, or anyone in law. It wasn't a custody situation, and without permission from the child's parent, legal guardian. They did not give her permission. Otherwise, they would not have filed her as a missing persons. Um, this child, I'm going to explain to you why I believe she was abducted. This child is 17 years old or younger. She's 12, and the law enforcement agency believes the child is in imminent danger of serious bodily harm or death, or if the individual is 18 years of age or older. Okay, so she's 17 years of age or younger. She's 12. Okay, she's 12. She's in imminent danger because she's 12 years old and she's missing, and she is across state lines. That's what they ended up finding out. All other possibilities for the victim's disappearance have been reasonably excluded. There is sufficient information available to disseminate to the public that could assist in locating the victim, suspect, or vehicle used in the abduction. The child's name and other critical data have been entered into NCIC. So it says here, if you respond no to any of the above statements, it does not meet the U.S. Department of Justice recommended criteria for the activation of the Amber Alert. How to activate the South Carolina Amber Alert. When the chief, sheriff, or designee determines that the case meets all of the criteria for activation of the South Carolina Amber Alert plan, call SLED headquarters. So South Carolina, they have their own, they'll issue a BOLO. Basically, they have similar criteria. So this is what I want to talk about. I want to explain the definition of sexual grooming, and I don't know if I sent this to the producer ahead of time to bring this up, but I wanted you guys to understand what sexual grooming is. Understanding sexual grooming and common sexual grooming behaviors can help professionals. Key elements: targeting the victim, securing access to and isolating the victim. That happened. She was secured and isolated because the 16-year-old took her unlawfully away from her home, gaining the victim's trust and controlling and concealing the relationship. I don't know if the relationship was concealed, but it was controlling. Where it occurs: in person, via the internet, or institutional settings. This was in person. So grooming is a method used by offenders that involves building trust with a child and the adults around a child in an effort to gain access to and time alone with him or with her or him. In extreme cases, offenders may use threats and physical force to sexually assault or abuse a child. More common, though, are subtle approaches designed to build relationships with families. The offender may assume a caring role, befriend the child, or even exploit their position of trust and authority to groom the child and or the child's family. These individuals intentionally build relationships with the adults around a child or seek out a child who is less supervised by adults in his or her life. This increases the likelihood that the offender's time with the child is welcomed and encouraged. The purpose of grooming is to manipulate the perceptions of other adults around the child, more than likely her parents, to manipulate the child into becoming a cooperating participant, which reduces the likelihood of a disclosure and increases the likelihood that the child will repeatedly return to the offender. This is exactly what happened. To reduce the likelihood of the child being believed if they do disclose, to reduce the likelihood of the abuse being detected. Grooming behaviors: an adult seems overly interested in a child or a young person. An adult frequently initiates or creates opportunities to be alone with the child or multiple children. An adult becomes fixated on a child. So all of this, they're speaking about adults, but in this case, this was a 16-year-old. And what I'm going to say to you is that this child was probably manipulated into becoming a cooperating participant, which reduces the likelihood. So I'm going to put out here that this was sexual grooming. Now, we don't have a sexual grooming law on the books yet in South Carolina. I'm actually working with some legislators on this, because with America's Future, we've got this passed in some other states, thanks to Michelle Peterson from Illinois, whose son was groomed by a high school coach. So, just based on the AmericanBar.org, in my opinion, based on this information, this child was sexually groomed. A 12-year-old does not have the capacity to think about what's going to happen if they run off with a 16-year-old. This is a classic thing in human trafficking. In this in this exact thing, where a person, and a lot of times the guy, a younger guy, is the recruiter for the larger groups, right? I'm not saying there's a larger sex trafficking ring involved with this. Could be, who knows? I'm not involved in the investigation in that standpoint. But a lot of times a young man will take the quality of time to invest in building a relationship like this talks about, in order to be able to gain the trust of this person and begin to start turning them away from their parents. And that's what I believe happened in this case. And I believe this 16-year-old should be held accountable, even if he is a juvenile. Maybe as a juvenile, get some kind of help. Unless he's tied to a larger ring, then maybe try him as an adult. But this is a classic sexual grooming. And I'm not going to probably move away from that opinion. Then the second piece that I want to share with you is about human trafficking. How is human trafficking defined by the Department of Justice? Sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, we had transportation in this, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of commercial sex act, in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, in which the person induced to perform such act has not attained 18 years of age. Um, I'm not sure that there was a commercial sex act taking place, but you had transportation and you had coercion and persuasion, because no 12-year-old who is not being manipulated and is doing well in that area, is not manipulated, is secure and in who they are as a young person, is going to willy-nilly just go across state lines without, mom and dad or whatever. And I'm not blaming the parents in this situation. I understand there was some rumors surrounding this situation that the police department chief, and I don't know if this is true, but allegedly blaming it on the parents, which is a pile of crap. I think that an Amber Alert should have been issued in this case, and had they done that, maybe the children wouldn't have crossed state lines. I don't know. Maybe they were already across state lines by the time they found out. Maybe they searched and did that part properly, but they should have, SLED should have issued an Amber Alert based on this. And this child more than likely was sexually groomed. You have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old. More than likely, she was being sexually groomed. And potentially, there could have been, trafficking involved, because she was transported and coercion or persuasion could have taken place. I'm not 100% sure, but it is something that I think the parents should look into legally. I wish we had a sexual grooming law on the books. Unfortunately, we don't. So I want to talk about a couple of other things that we're going to pull up here, and I want to make sure I'm pulling up the same information that my so we're going to talk about the Shared Hope report card with an overall grade of an F. This was from 2022, I believe. Let me look at the date. 2021. Sorry, guys, 2021. But if you look at the report card, criminal provisions, we have a B. So at that time, we were doing good. Identification and response to victims, failure, an F. Continuum of care, so aftercare, support for the victim, an F. Access to justice for trafficking survivors, a D. That's bad. Tools for a victim centered criminal justice response, F. And then prevention and training, F. And this is also to blame Alan Wilson, which I believe is a pedophile protector. But when we have this type of a rating, now we're going to take a look at the next one, which we now have a D rating with the most recent Shared Hope International. So we responded up a grade in a few areas. Criminal provisions is still a B. I want to get that to an A. Identification of and response to victims, we are still at an F. Because a lot of times, law enforcement or the task force will wait on calls from the human trafficking hotline. And for those types of to that's how they'll measure some of their data. We had an increase of 450% in human trafficking cases just based on um, Alan Wilson's own report. He says it's not a legit report, but it is. It's his own report. But this stat of what happened with Emily Hollis would not be included in those stats because they marked her as a runaway. I don't believe they did right by how they categorize this. We have continuum of care, a D, access to justice for trafficking survivors, a D, tools for a victim-centered criminal justice response, a D, prevention and training, we still have an F. Shared Hope International is who works with America's Future as far as advocacy, ambassadorship, training, education, getting things out there. And um, Alan Wilson sucks at that with his task force. They can greatly improve it. And he doesn't need to be the AG. He needs to be investigated, and he needs to not run for governor. But in this case, I believe I wanted to bring this to the head. I think these parents have a reason. If they, I'm not speaking for them. I've not talked to them or anything like that. But I believe they have a reason to be upset and frustrated, to say the least. Um, and I believe that they have a reason to look at all their legal options in this case. If this was my daughter, um, you know, I would be looking at legal options. And we need to improve our legislation. I'm actually going to shift this program here in just a second to kind of address some things that's going on in our state, what's happened in this last week, which is so interesting. Um, these agencies, by and large, are not working to combat this effectively, because if they were, just like when Alex Rosen came into South Carolina and caught and hunted down pedophiles through digital decoys, and then met them and had it all on camera, had all the evidence. And when police departments like Spartanburg called Alan Wilson's office and said, "Do you want us to prosecute this?" And he said no. When civilians bring evidence forward, especially where this is happening, because I mean, I'm just saying, when they bring this type of information forward, it's crucial that they take a look at it and they get these perps off the streets. So with this 16-year-old, there's obviously something wrong. If he's taking a 12-year-old out of if he's taking a 12-year-old out of state, there's a serious problem there. And so I really wanted to bring this story forward. I invite the parents to come forward if they want, and I'll share this platform, and they're welcome to share their side of the story. um, I don't know if that's something they're interested in. This isn't about picking them apart. It's not like a typical news thing, but I think it's important for this agency, whoever was in charge of deciding that this child didn't deserve an Amber Alert with SLED. I think that they should be evaluated and terminated from their position, or they should resign. And I think the Beaufort County or the Beaufort City, the police department, whatever, I think it was, I don't know if it was Bluffton or Beaufort. I think it was Beaufort. It might have been Bluffton, but whichever chief was actually involved in this case, he should be terminated from his position or resign, because this child should have been entered into NCIC, and an Amber Alert should have been issued from the state and federal level. And the reason I say that is when they decide what abduction means, when that's the thing that they can't decide how to define, this child's out there and she's in imminent danger. I don't care if she got in the car. This child has been manipulated to some degree to be able to go in a car like that. And I don't care what anyone says. That's classic science. I've been in this field for a long time. I've experienced it myself, and I know what this looks like. This is a classic sign of sexual grooming and moving into trafficking. It shows the intent. Um, so I'm not saying that this 16-year-old's life should be ruined over this, but he needs to understand. I mean, he needs to be evaluated. They need to take a close, hard look at his electronics and look at what's going on. They should look at the young ladies as well and see if there was any exploitation, see if there was any, sexual grooming taking place. Um, This is a big deal. We just passed the child luring bill this last year. That's important. Let's take a look at this. And so I wanted to bring this forward because I'm angered with the community, just like y'all are, not to the extent of the parents. I'm worried about this because what if this would have been another child? What if the child would have been 10 years old and ran away, or 8 years old and ran away? How do they define abduction versus runaway? I mean, it's a 12-year-old. This is negligence when I think about what happened to this child. And that's just my opinion as a citizen journalist, but also as a former victim, survivor turned overcomer. Um, I, I'm thinking about when I went to my high school counselor and I told them part of what was happening. I couldn't tell them everything because I was threatened to be killed and that my body would never be found. But I'm thinking about this and how scared I was at 13 when I was put on a plane from one part of the country to the other. Do you think I was gonna just go tell anyone willy-nilly? So when I finally went to my school counselor, she took me seriously. Law enforcement was called in. So this is a really big deal. This is a very big deal. And for Beaufort to come out, the city of Beaufort, and basically put out a cover your ass, excuse my language, I normally don't cuss at all, but cover their asses on this. An apology sounds better, and a demand for resignation. And I hope these parents find legal counsel. I really do. At least getting some answers. This child was abducted by definition of the Department of Justice and SLED. If they think that she just ran away, I mean, yeah, wild horses couldn't keep those parents away from making sure that their daughter was found. And I'm so glad that they fought and the community came around them. Thank you to Michael Covert for covering it. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to kind of shift gears into something else that happened that still has to do with this topic. Um, Anything that I've missed detail wise, look, guys, I just wanted to make sure I put this story out because I wanted to define what abduction was, what trafficking is, and talk about some couple of different situations in our state that were not addressed. Think how many kids are marked as runaways that aren't. They've been sexually groomed and they were actually trafficked. Think about that and think about how our state responds to that. They have a horrible rating. We have to improve this. And we can't wait on law enforcement or government to do this. We, the people, are the government. Our unalienable rights have been endowed to us by our Creator. That's how the Constitution is written. Now, I'm not saying to go out and be vigilantes and do things blowing down doors. That's not what we do. There's actually trainings available to you through ARC, Association for the Recovery of Children. Go to recoveryofchildren.org and you can sign up for their 6-day training. And they teach you about prevention, intervention, and aftercare, and where you fit in that area, how to actually do this as a citizen and help get a hold of this problem. We have to. We should not have a D rating and F rating in all these other areas. I'm not going to put my trust in government because our government, our budget keeps blowing up in South Carolina. Our government keeps blowing up in this sense of growing government. And we have a bunch of pedo protectors at the State House and in the AG's office and apparently in other agencies and law enforcement agencies. So we need to really take a look at this. And when I say pedo protectors, when you're allowing these types of things, I'm not saying this 16-year-old was a pedo, but I'm giving you kind of a taste of what we're about to talk about after this break here in a second. We're actually talk about what pedophile protectors are and rapist protectors and those types of things. So we'll be right back after this break.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 6-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Hey, welcome back. So if you use the code LYNZ, LYNZ, you can actually use that at My Pillow and get a discount. And you're also helping support the work that I'm doing. The other thing I always want to tell people about is efani.com/Lynz. This is America's most secure mobile network. They have an incredible system in place for phone plans so that SIM swaps can be hopefully mostly prevented. And I've moved my entire family over. It was well worth it. So efani.com/Lynz. And I'll have a link up on my Rumble channel for discussions with one of the founders of the organization, as well as someone that helps with ghost computers and ghost phones. Anyway, one of the comments that came up on this last segment before we got here, after the break, this was without a doubt an abduction with intent to harm and an abject failure not to issue an Amber Alert. Failure of Beaufort City Police Chief of Police. Yes, I thought it was Beaufort. So thank you, Titus35, for putting that out there. I was pretty sure it wasn't Bluffton. Thank you so much for speaking up and for sharing this. So something else that happened this week, we're going to pull up this Facebook post. I'm going to run through these few posts really quick. April Cromer for House had put up some information because there was a text message put out mass against those that voted against a particular bill. If you can scroll down just a little bit to the image, and then we'll show you a couple of the others. It says covering for predators instead of protecting kids, ? Which is really interesting because I'm gonna talk to you about this here in a second. And then the other two from X. I think they pretty much hit up all of this. Is Sarita Edgerton, Representative Sarita Edgerton, and then there was another one on April Cromer. I'm pretty sure that all of anyone who voted no against this bill for social media this week. So the bill would actually require, if passed, would require family members to give identifying documents such as passports, social security numbers, driver's licenses, in order to gain access to social media accounts. And if I'm understanding correctly, so the Freedom Caucus voted no against this. It doesn't mean that they're pedophile protectors, but if you remember, Nikki Haley wanted to do this, and it's a Marxist ideology. This will not stand up against. If this was passed, it would not. There would be a lawsuit filed almost immediately because it violates Constitution 100%. So these guys voted appropriately. What's really interesting about usually what happens in a situation like this is that the people calling out the individuals that are, in this case, calling them pedophile protectors, are actually the ones that are probably covering up for pedophiles or protecting them. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. And everyone keeps coming back. I'm just going to talk about this really quick. Everyone keeps coming back to RJ May. RJ May was the former vice chair of the South Carolina Freedom Caucus. His home was raided by, I think it was Homeland Security, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. And allegedly, there was devices confiscated for potentially child sex abuse material or child pornography or other things. The thing is that the warrant is sealed. Now, sometimes these warrants are open, so then it's a fact that XYZ was done, this is what was found, and then there's an indictment and whatever. But in this particular case, the warrant is sealed. And usually if Homeland Security is involved in something like this, it went across state lines. And if it's sealed, it can be sealed for a number of reasons. It could be because there is maybe minors to protect. It could be witnesses. It could be a number of things. So the warrant is sealed. This is why I have not come out and condemned him, but I condemn the action. And I've given you the situation as it is of how I would handle it. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So the warrant is sealed. So right now, there's no public evidence to be able to say whatever. It's been coming down the pipelines that there is going to be an indictment. Um, and then the GOP House Caucus continues to say that the Freedom Caucus is protecting pedophiles also because they haven't publicly condemned, and this is what the narrative is, that they haven't publicly condemned RJ May. But the thing is that RJ May was suspended from the South Carolina Freedom Caucus, and for what reasons or what, I don't know. I'm not in the Freedom Caucus, but he's also not a member of the GOP House Caucus because he didn't sign the loyalty pledge. So right now, basically, until he's indicted, and when he is indicted, he's removed from all committee assignments and he's not able to vote. That's my understanding. So until that happens, we're waiting to see what happens. So let me just say that I believe that anyone that participates in child pornography, child sexual grooming, child trafficking, sex slavery, torture, murder, organ harvesting, adrenochrome, any and all of the stuff in between administration participation in any shape or form. I believe that upon a fair and speedy trial, they get the death penalty. And if you don't like my answer to that, look at Ted Bundy. Uh, and you can go back and look at that. He gave his life to Jesus. Dr. James Dobson has said, how do you reconcile the fact that you gave your life to Jesus, but tomorrow you're going on the chair? And he said, look, I know when I die where I'm going to go. I don't get to decide how the blood of Jesus is distributed. So I'm not going to say he's in hell. Just putting that out there. But he said there's still a price to be paid for what I did here on the earth. Now I'm paraphrasing that, but you can go and you can Google that. But my point is, historically, most the child luring bill was not pulled out of committee, out of Judiciary Committee. That was Nancy Mace's original bill when she was at the State House, and she couldn't get it past the Judiciary. Do you know one of the chairmen of the Judiciary was former Judiciary chairman was Chris Murphy. He blocked all anti-human trafficking legislation. I've received that from both Democrats and Republicans, and he says they're all lying, basically. But he blocked all of that. Instead, the state legislators elect the judges, as you South Carolinians know, who are going to be coming in. So who do they bring in? They bring in Chris Murphy's case, his wife, Maite Murphy, and his brother. In other cases, they get people like Judge Bentley Price, who lets violent repeat offenders back on the street. Chris Murphy is one of those people, as a criminal defense attorney, and has gotten violent repeat offenders back out on the street. So if I were to say who's protecting pedophiles, excluding Brandon Guffey, whose son committed suicide as a result of sextortion, which is a horrific story. He's made state and national headlines on this bill, and I think even international, that he got passed. It's named after his son. Um, he's out on a flaming trail to go after this stuff. Excluding him, I know he and I don't agree on a lot of other things, but I stand with him on this. That's a big deal. So when I see people not allowing, like AG Allen Wilson, not putting, giving plea bargains out to violent criminals, dropping most of the sex crimes against children charges on people, and they get to walk free, or not accepting civilian evidence and letting people walk free, or whatever reason, that's someone that is a pedophile protector. If you're not willing to pass legislation or you're blocking it, you're a pedophile protector. When you take a look at these things. So in this case, the Freedom Caucus is actually not the pedophile protectors. They've issued statements that they don't support these types of activities. So for the GOP House Caucus to come out against South Carolina Freedom Caucus in this way is so wrong. I mean, these people shouldn't be in office. The other ways that pedophiles are protected in our state is through different agencies by not investigating things properly. I mean, I can't tell you how many victims after Nancy Mace came out public with her story, and I believe her. I don't think she would risk her entire career, but there's a lot of other reasons I know that she's telling the truth. Um, but in that case, that was protection of pedophiles. It shouldn't take 10 months for a victim to get a victim's advocate. It shouldn't take this long before things are looked at. She should not have had to go to the congressional floor to bring this all out to the front. But right after she did that, I received multiple messages and spoke with some people in person that said there was never investigations, or investigations were blocked because so and so works in this department, in this agency, this person. And look, I am back the blue. I love our first responders and our law enforcement, but we need some huge accountability, transparency, and justice in these areas. I'm sickened by what's happening. And rather than basically sitting down and saying we've screwed up, we need to make changes, they just keep covering their butts and putting out this type of messaging. Um, I would I would tell you that by getting these judges in without judicial reform in our state, it's this is horrific. I can't tell you how many cases, how many people I've talked to in our state that are completely sickened that there is no justice. There's elected officials that participate in potentially illegal behavior, and they're not prosecuted. Why? But they go after low hanging fruit. They go after the average civilian, which they should. But why are elected officials and people in law enforcement not held to the same standard? And so I wanted to come out and say, look, if it took you until last year to pass a child luring bill out of judiciary to get that up and out of there, you might be a pedophile protector if you waited that long. If you're blocking anti-human trafficking legislation, you're protecting the predators. And I mean, we know that there are some predators that are elected in office, at least on the federal level. I'm sure there are some at the state level. Um, and I know that there are people covering up for these individuals in law enforcement agencies. And so we need to take a whole cold hard look at this. And this little girl came home, but she was abducted. I've read you the language. These people made the worst choice possible. They can put out the timeline of events all they want, but they were wrong. And so we need to gut out the corruption in this state and federally, yes, but we need to gut it out. And it's going to take parents through peace, law, and order, grandparents, aunts, uncles. And if you don't have anyone in the system, children or anything like that, and you're a citizen, the responsibility is on you as well. We have to make a change. We have to. I will be bringing a training to South Carolina through America's Future regarding some of this training we're doing with anti-trafficking. We're working on dates to see where it's going to fit at in this year. We're doing all 50 states, so we'll be bringing that training here. So stay tuned for that, for location and dates and all of that. But I really want you guys to put pressure through peace, law, and order on this police department. This police chief needs to be he needs to resign, or he needs to be fired. And I would say that whoever is in the SLED area that made the determination not to issue an Amber Alert should also be terminated from his position, or he or she should resign as well. We can do better. And I would say to law enforcement that were involved in this, and you're covering your butts, what if this was your daughter, your granddaughter, your niece, your wife, someone else? What would you do? If the correct answer would be you would move heaven and earth to find your child, or to find the child. You would do everything humanly possible. I have zero tolerance for this crap, and I'm done. And I'm calling out the elected officials. I mean, right now, last thing, I'm just going to leave. We have most of our GOP delegate or legislators on the House side and Democrats, excluding Freedom Caucus, that supported a bill with the Council on American Islamic Relations. They worked with them. And that is a Hamas founded and funded piece of legislation. Look what happened to Shiri and her two boys over in Israel. They were strangled and stoned to death. I don't know what happened to her, but these are terrorists. And our legislators are working with a Hamas founded and funded organization on legislation. Why didn't former Representative Alan Clemens' bill to direct law enforcement agencies and other entities in our state that this, CARE is, we should not be working with CARE and it's Hamas founded and funded. Why wasn't that ever brought up out of Judiciary Committee? And right after that, he won his primary. He was basically, I don't know if the facts were true or not, but basically he resigned not long after that, before the general election. And he's a magistrate in equity. And no bill has ever been brought forward to say that we shouldn't work with CARE. Instead, they're working with CARE. People like Chris Murphy defend it on behalf of Israel in a video. He got shut down by the GOP. We voted against that resolution through our county reorg. These are the type of people that the Freedom Caucus are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So I really want you to consider getting involved more than what you are now. We can't sit back and wait for Trump to do everything. We, the people, are the government. Our country was founded on a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And we have to take this back and say, no, we will not tolerate this. Zero tolerance, zero exceptions, zero excuses. That's where I stand in this process. And I'm bringing up the terrorist stuff again because that should be alarming to you. That's like a welcome mat for Sharia law. There is a Muslim compound being built up inside of Texas in the Dallas area. And that will be a Sharia law area. These guys don't think that you're paying attention to what's happening. Like a lot of the bills are bad. But when you look at their relationships with CARE, why are they working with a terrorist founded and funded organization? That's treason, in my opinion. We have a lot to be concerned about in South Carolina. And this abduction is serious. What they are doing to distract, they're doing these things against the Freedom Caucus to distract what's actually right in front of your eyes. So pay attention. Now I'm talking about South Carolina, but this is in every single state, my friends, in every single state. In fact, when I released the last message, the producer can confirm, I got threats on my phone, a number that is not listed and is a brand new number, has not been used in forever. I doxed them. We traced it back to a foreign shell company, LLC. So they don't like us talking about this stuff. And I think if you're working with a terrorist founded and funded organization, you shouldn't be in office. And almost all of the Republican GOP caucus voted for that, except for the Freedom Caucus members and the Democrats. It moved over to the Senate side in South Carolina. They're building an amendment and they're going to push it back over. Pay attention to what's happened. So I'm going to end here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Annie, the producer. She's amazing. Thank you to Ex American News. Thank you to all of you that are listening. Please go to my website, lynz.co, subscribe to the newsletter, and consider making a contribution in the upper right-hand corner. It helps with my investigations. It helps with training for a dog that Esther, she'll be helping to. She's being trained to help find missing kids. She's about 7 months old and she's doing great. Thank you so much for tuning in to this special edition. God bless you and God bless America.